Great. Well, welcome everyone to an Idaho Plant Medicine Let's Talk event, which is looking at all the plant medicine efforts that are going on right now in Idaho and all the exciting things going on with plant medicine. And plant medicine might be ibogaine, or it might be cannabis, it might be psilocybin. Those are some of the things that we might talk about today. But I personally am a mental health therapist and substance use professional and came from a background of working with folks in the system, lots of homeless folks and people that were locked up in jail and in different mental health hospitals and lost their kids through CPS, and seeing the world through those eyes and trying to help people with the systems that we have in place, and seeing a lot of recidivism and a lot of people that didn't get well in those systems. And I was drawn to things like ibogaine, what I was reading about from the research, and psilocybin, and knew already of some of the medical aspects of cannabis that are so profound for people that are looking for a different alternative healing. And so I got involved in the plant medicine movement, which basically means just like helping people out, working with different groups. I think I've tried to connect with all the groups that are represented today. And so I just want to introduce some of our moderators. Mary Jane Oatman will be speaking, hopefully, on Indigenous medicine and the Indigenous cannabis effort in the United States and in Idaho. Sarah Frank from Legalize Idaho is not here, but Courtney Anderson is here to speak on behalf of the organization. Joe Evans is here to speak about Kind Idaho and also kind of give us an update of what he knows about the Natural Medicine Alliance, which is the medical cannabis effort for November 2026 election. And then we have Elizabeth Kahn, who is part of the GLOW psilocybin study for veterans effort at the legislative level, and then also heads up the Idaho Psychedelic Society. And I think that's everyone. So why don't we pass the mic to you? And Courtney, if you could just kind of tell us an overview of maybe like how you got involved as a volunteer, why you got involved maybe as a volunteer, and what kind of support you guys could use for your organization, and what are you seeing? What are people excited about? And you had mentioned as we were just getting going, the social media aspect and how profound that is. So maybe if for people that are just getting to know about the cannabis movement in Idaho, what would you say?
Okay, so yeah, I'm Courtney Anderson. I'm with Legalize Idaho, and I personally got into this advocacy thing. In high school, I kind of made a statement to my teacher that I was going to be a part of this movement and bringing it to Idaho. And like 35 years later, I finally got my foot in the door. So it's kind of a life dream of mine to be a part of this. And us with Legalize Idaho, we're all volunteers and we're community based and we are spread throughout Idaho. And our goal mainly is we're the info hub of the movement. So we try to talk about and share all things cannabis here in Idaho, like anything that's going on with it. We are on the Educate and Legalize Idaho tour right now, which the purpose of this tour is to spread education about all things cannabis, raising awareness for things like the HJR4, any petitions that are circulating, any events that are going on. We just try to inform about all things that we learn about the movement. So um, that's so HJR4, which is our main focus, I guess you would say, is we're trying to make sure people are clear about what HDR4 is and make sure they all know that to go vote in the election next year in November and vote no because we feel not enough people know exactly what it's about. They're not understanding it fully and what it means. So that's our main focus, really, and educating all across Idaho.
And do you guys have like an upcoming event, or could you maybe in the chat write down like the website and um yeah,
Yes, we actually we have a town hall, which our town halls cover many different topics. It is also on Zoom. We have those on the first Saturday of every month, and the second Saturday of every month we have meet and greets in all across Idaho, and where we have people there. So second Saturday we have meet and greets, which is just trying to get volunteers to join the group, and um, pretty much that's focusing on right now we're focusing on just getting volunteers to join and help us out on our mission of spreading awareness.
wonderful. And you already covered all the things that volunteers are doing.
Yes, well we are going to begin in the beginning of next year is when we're really going to start pushing things. But right now we are doing the Educate and Legalize Idaho tour, like I said, and I'm not sure where the next one is, but we just had one in Meridian, I believe. And I think we're hoping in December to have a couple more education events in Pocatello and here in Idaho Falls and Rexburg down in this area here. And all that, those are just open house, inviting invitations to the community to come learn a little bit about cannabis and basically all things cannabis, the medicinal end of it, the history of it, and there's a lot of information available there. We're there to discuss anything that anybody would like to speak about, and so they're really fun, actually.
Wonderful. It sounds like it's a community and that it's a grassroots movement, and it sounds like many people working on this for years.
Yes, most of the members of the group have been in this for quite some time. I happen to be the greenest member, I believe, but I'm bringing back their enthusiasm and I'm kind of reigniting their passion. So it's fun. It's a really fun thing to be a part of, and I'm learning a lot.
Wow, that sounds like powerful work. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And then if you can respond to the questions that come after the other speakers, that would be great.
Okay.
So Elizabeth, do you feel comfortable going next?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Courtney. And thanks for all the great work that you're doing. Grateful to be on here. And Leo, thanks for your bringing this collaborative collective, if you will. Yeah. So my story, if you will, I won't dwell on that too long, but it's very much actually like Leo's, which is that I worked with these medicines, started to work with them a few years back. And I should also mention that although it's not my actual day profession, I work in cybersecurity. And I also teach in that field, instruct in that field. I have worked in hospice part-time off and on over the last 20 years. So, much like Leo said, I've actually seen people in great distress, kind of end of life anxiety, just that conundrum, that fear. And so when I started working with these plant medicines a few years back, I very quickly became aware that there are these different type of solutions that can be very helpful, like Leo said, and can heal or can really help with this type of distress, especially that I had seen in end of life, that there's really profound opportunity there. And so, as you know, I founded the Idaho Psychedelic Society earlier this year and then Glow Idaho not too long after to handle the advocacy piece. And we've been working on, getting momentum, building coalitions, reaching out to organizations, really education. Educating myself too, actually, and really sort of building this foundation. I mean, can you believe we're actually on this call right now and we're talking about Idaho in this topic? I mean, it's amazing, it's profound, it's beautiful, and it's a little astonishing. So, but with that word astonishment, honestly, there's been some stunning astonishment of support and encouragement from the most unexpected places. So yeah, we just continue to educate, to learn. We'll probably have a little bit more to say towards the end of the year, towards the beginning of the next year, when we'll, like you said, Courtney, kind of get more deeper into whatever it is that we're doing going forward. Is that a good kickoff?
Yeah, my only question was about the study as far as the veterans go. Is that
Yeah.
something
Yes.
you can
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah.
okay.
So again, my own interest was sort of the, end of life and all of that. But I had been aware that the Department of Defense, I'm sure you may all know, had started to really look into these studies and actually started a study last year for veterans. So we're seeing strong signaling kind of on the national level. I mean, not only the tsunami, right? Oregon and Colorado and Massachusetts is looking at it. And Leo, you know all of this. And, there's this wave of a shift, if you will, right? But of all the astonishing things, can you believe the Department of Defense is, the Veterans Organization is, commissioning a study. So seeing that and understanding the PTSD, and actually let me just lean into, psilocybin. I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but in 2018 and 19, it was designated an FDA breakthrough treatment for PTSD and treatment-resistant depression. Earlier this year, about 2 months ago, there's a study that came out. I think it was Imperial College and Heroic Hearts did a collaboration with Dr. Grace Hopley. And that was showing for veterans, that was showing, it's really astonishing, but with therapy combined with these plant therapies, showing, I think it was, I don't know, you can correct me, Leo, but I think it want to say a 71 or 77% recovery rate, which is astonishing. And we don't have a solution like that right now. So for that reason, I was like, ooh, I'm seeing this signal. I'm seeing the veterans. I'm seeing this alignment. I'm seeing these results. Let's start there because there's some precedent to start there and to help this population. So there you go.
Yeah, no, that's amazing stuff. I didn't mean to interject, but the gentleman, I just watched his Netflix show. I forget the gentleman, Brian, what's his face? He's like, used to be a Mormon from Utah, but then he kind of like defected, but he's the guy trying to live forever or whatever I forget his name, but he made a bunch of money in IT or whatever, but now he's going to do psilocybin as one of his things.
Wow.
And all these people in the psychedelic community are excited because Emory University did a study on psilocybin that showed people's cells, their human cells, like decelerating in age or whatever, like reverse aging these cells.
Mm.
And so that's why this guy Brian is trying the psilocybin because there's the efficacy that's been proven with the clinical trial at Emory. So not just what you were mentioning, but now they're showing the
Mm.
capacity to make us younger, which, would be great because then we could
America, let
live
anything that would
longer.
make us younger, bring it on. And to your point, Leo, as you know, the studies that have been coming out of, say, Johns Hopkins or that Roland Griffin has done for the, several decades, right, have been very powerful. There's a great deal of data out there about the efficacy of this plant therapy.
Right. No, it's amazing. I'm a true believer. But not for everyone. And so I think that's great that you're doing a study that you're going to be part of a study or help support a study focused on veterans, because that's clearly where some money is willing, that people are willing to budget money because of the suicide epidemic for veterans and things like that. Um, so Mary Jane Oatman is at the airport and she says there's a lot of loud noise, and so she's very worried about the background noise. So we may not get her on here, but I'll try to get, or someone else, if you can put the Indigenous website for her organization in the chat, that would be helpful. But Joe, why don't you bring us to a close as far as talking about the Natural Medicine Alliance and talking about the origins of Kind Idaho and everything that you and Jackie have been doing.
Okay, so I'm Joe Evans. I'm with Kind Idaho. Jackie and I have been working on legalization with a focus on medical cannabis for, the last 6 years now. So we've done two iterations of the medical cannabis before we went for a decriminalization option. Now, this year, 2 weeks ago, Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho was able to find the funding and put together, a series, an organization structure in order to pursue a medical cannabis uh, initiative here in the state of Idaho that is well funded, and they're in the process of paying signature gatherers to collect, which is something we've never actually seen in Idaho before. Someone actually putting up the money, hiring an organization that is skilled in the process of gathering those signatures and getting ready to move it through and get it on the ballot. So Natural Medicine of Idaho, Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho is the primary organization behind that. They're leading the charge. The signatures have been gathering for 2 weeks now. They expect to be able to do that here before too much longer. Their target is his first of the year in order to qualify it for the ballot. And as things pick up speed, as we move into the holiday season, things are beginning to look good because they managed to put nearly, over 100 paid signature gatherers on their roster. They're out collecting signatures daily as we go. Jackie and I have been paying some attention to that and also helping with some of the training in order to make sure that they're up to speed with the Idaho way of doing petition initiatives. And we managed to help get them, on track efficiently so that they weren't wasting a lot of time going back over ground, and trying to recover from the little mistakes that they hide in our legislative process. So the team that they've hired to do that, which is in your field, has been extremely welcoming, friendly. And of course, our ability to help them, of course, guarantees success of a ballot initiative being on the November ballot next year, running opposite HJR4. Now, our Decriminalize initiative, which we started a year ago, and we've collected some 10,000 signatures for, 1/7 of what we actually need. We've suspended that drive so that we aren't trying to run two competing initiatives for signatures at the same time. It's a suspended. We did not withdraw. We simply suspended. We're not pushing our initiative because, Kind Idaho, it's always been a patient advocacy organization. As a result, actually seeing a medical cannabis initiative with a nearly guaranteed success of getting on the ballot, Jackie and I and our other board members basically went, yeah, let's do this. Let's get them taken care of. Let's get them on the ballot. Then we'll take a look at where we are and move on from there. Some of the things that I've been doing for reason, I'm a veteran. I got a lot of vet friends with post-traumatic stress injury, traumatic brain injuries, all of which natural plant medicines have a far higher efficacy rate for healing than many of the options that are coming out of the pharmaceutical industries. We've seen temporary relief from cannabis for short-term duration to long-term solutions can be made available. Psilocybin continues to show promise, particularly with post-traumatic stress injuries and traumatic brain. And the veteran community, especially SF and some of the others, the special operations units. A lot of the Green Berets and SEALs that are coming out of those teams, have found the efficacy rates for things like ibogaine, ayahuasca, and psilocybin to be extremely high and facilitate recovery, getting them back into the business and being able to bring them back into the culture they left home to protect. So again, plant medicine across the board. This isn't just about cannabis, and although my focus is on vets, it's not just about vets. They're not the only ones who continue to see those issues with post-traumatic stress, with traumatic brain injuries, heightened alert status, anxiety, all of the issues. We're seeing more and more potential. One, this gets medicine out of the hands of PharmaCorp. It puts it in our backyards, creates the ability for us to grow our own medicine, tailor our own medicine and work with indigenous processes, learned experiences, and ancient medicines to be able to dial in, the medicines that have worked for our heritage, regardless of which heritage it is, and be able to integrate that with other medicines from around the world so that we can continue to see growth, experience, and knowledge associated with plant medicine network and world.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and thank you for covering both organizations and putting that information in the chat for anyone who's interested. So Mary Jane Oatman was able to join us, and I would like to end our panel talk with, her ability. I know she's at the airport to share, where she's at in her effort with plant medicine and the indigenous movement, and all that she's doing, and not just in Idaho but beyond. So let's just welcome her as she's able to join the conversation.
Himakas Katsuyao, thank you to our creator for gathering us all here tonight. I am just pinching myself to be in this amazing room full of advocates that are, trying to sharpen the spear point for Idaho to lead. And from the work that I do, I work globally with indigenous communities, and I'm in Washington DC, where we just wrapped up our 4th annual Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association Summit, and it was very humbling to be able to come out here and do this for 4 years in a row. Emotionally a little bit drained because we're out here, and my mom calls it, because they call it Turtle Island, that's a big reference to this beautiful country and these lands. And my mom calls Washington, D.C. the butthole of Turtle Island. So she just had me just, rolling in laughter as I was, thinking about, what we were out here, doing and striving to protect, just basic, human rights to be able to heal ourselves in a way that we know what works. And for our indigenous communities, and even for my community that I come from, I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe. It's one of the federally recognized tribes in Idaho. I'm just this year in 2025 was dealing with criminal charges myself in Idaho County, was able to get those successfully dismissed, as well as my brother, uncles. I mean, I find myself doing a lot of advocacy work in the courts for my Idaho relatives, but I'm in another really weird situation where we're helping tribes craft carve-outs for plant medicine access, as well as economic development opportunities. But for the big focus of what I'm doing is really to try to walk and talk tribes off the ledge of just focusing on, the ROI of economic development of, corporate cannabis. Tribal corporate cannabis is the way that I look at it. Like, even doing some anti-monopoly, tribal corporate monopoly work, making sure that the rights of the individual sovereign citizen are not stepped on by tribal governments, which does tend to happen. We've seen that in the landscape from coast to coast, where tribal governments are coming in and only focusing on recreation and not the medicine. But that's also, just a small pain or pinch point. The biggest blessing is that most of the tribes are embracing this as medicine. We've got several tribes across the country that have actually adopted sacramental as a definition, which was passed at the ASTM D37 committee. So getting the decolonized mindset of my relatives is a big push, because there was such a long tenured negative education campaign to keep us away from that sacred relationship. And also carrying forward the message of sovereignty. It's inclusive of all of us in humanity, because we all are being denied that liberty and that freedom to be able to have a relationship with a plant. it's a plant, it's a botanical, it's not even a drug, it's a botanical. So it's just really interesting to take a couple steps forward and 10 backwards. I'm the founder of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, which is kind of the birthplace of Tribal Hemp and Cannabis magazine. I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of the nation's first and only print publication that's dedicated to all things tribal hemp and cannabis. And I serve as the founding executive director of the ICIA, which is a 501c6 trade association. So we've got the 501 nonprofit side with the ability to be able to do the lobbying and the advocacy work at another level. We were out here in Washington, D.C. supporting a tribal member from Arizona that is running for the 5th Congressional District. Cannabis is huge on his ballot and campaign for safe, quality, affordable medical access for his communities and to get tribal communities moving in that direction. And then also in doing that, we supported former Normal legislative director Justin Streckel, who was running for a seat in Ohio. And he's very much been an ambassador of Indigenous cannabis work. And we're just getting started. Tribes are usually 5 years behind, 10 years behind most efforts. And so in Idaho, what that specifically means is, we are going to ramp up our efforts in educating Idaho tribal councils about the impacts of House Joint Resolution 4, as well as the new initiative, and do more community-based education, and just get back to what we all do, I think, the best, which is connecting with our communities and leading with with heart and love, and trying to keep the science in cannabis and for me, a lot of the hard work, as well as like just this radical religious ideology that pushes back against this plant, and so finding those tools. And for me, it's like really just a privilege to be amongst you all. And so I'll just stop it there. But I just know that collaboration is key. Partnerships is really going to get us a lot further. And please consider me. I know I'm super busy with the work that I do at that national level. I also own an import-export foreign trade company that provides technical assistance to tribes. So I can tell you that with this the tariffs and the IEPA and all of that fun stuff, it's had me really busy. But when we talk about plant medicine, in our tribal communities, it's about healing, it's about repair, and it's about not waiting for permission to do what we know works. And so to be able to stand in allyship with all of you, to be able to do that work, it feels like it's a long overdue, but at the same time, I mean, we're all still just cultivating relationships with each other and planting seeds wherever we go. And it's hard work. So thank you all for being servant leaders of your communities and this plant, because it's not easy. And the fact that we have this many people on this call is a testament that we're not going to fucking give up.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like you probably need to get going, so you can't probably stick around for the questions and stuff, right? Or you can for a minute.
I can. I'm just gonna go off camera,
Okay.
just and mute. But I will be here. I'm listening. I got my ear pods in, and so I will definitely be tuned in. But I just don't want to have any additional distractions. But I'm watching and I'm listening, and I'm totally tuned in.
Okay. I have a list of questions that we had emailed the community to try to get some questions ahead of time. But if there's anyone that wants to ask questions from the crowd, please raise your hand, and then we can move on to the ones that I received. So we'll just wait a second and see if folks in the crowd have a question for one person or for multiple people on the panel. Sometimes there's a general question.
I guess I was just going to ask Courtney, so in 2026, is there a law that's going to be passed, or you're hoping for a law to be passed? It's been coming up every year and not getting passed. I guess I didn't understand about the law.
Okay, the HJR 4, House Joint Resolution 4, is actually a proposed amendment that will be on the 2026 ballot. And it's basically the legislators are asking us to give up our right to file or vote on citizen initiatives having to do with marijuana, narcotics, or psychoactive substances. So they want to take away full decision making power over anything having to do with those three. That means like cultivating, growing, growing or selling or any of that. They want to have full control over the decision making over that. So they are not only attacking our right to vote and our voices, they're they are trying to silence us before we even had a chance to vote on it. And that's kind of not fair considering 70% of Idahoans have consistently shown support for medical access in Idaho, and they've never let us vote on that, which is kind of unfair. They want to silence us because they know they're going to lose their power.
And there might be some questions here I'm not reading the chat right now, but I know Joe has his hand up really quick, just checking to see if we have some new questions there. People may not be aware, but Texas had just allotted, that's a pretty Republican state, had allotted millions of dollars for ibogaine research out of the opiate fund money that was distributed for combating drug addiction in various states. So I think that that's fascinating that such a Republican state would put so much money towards ibogaine research. And folks may not be also aware that Utah has a psilocybin church. So I think we often think about Utah, we think very conservative or Mormon, but there's actually a psilocybin legal church in Utah, and there's a ayahuasca legal church in Washington State and in Oregon, and also federally. So I think sometimes people don't realize these things are out there. They're just not touching their lives. They may not be aware that people are already doing these medicines, whether it's like the Native American church or what have you. And one thing I wanted to point out from what Courtney was saying was, from my understanding, the HJR4, which people would vote on in 2026, would bar anyone ever having a chance as a voter to put something forward that says cannabis for legalization purposes, just for medical, or whatever, anything having to do with plant medicine ever, is my understanding, for like forever, if HJR4 passes. So that's really concerning because, as Elizabeth was mentioning, there's all this like clinical research coming out about psilocybin, and it's just these things that later on we may realize are kind of our sovereign rights. Like Mary Jane Oman was speaking to, they were our sovereign rights all along, but maybe we just kind of finally identify that there's clinical properties that we have a right to access, and its nature. We don't have to wait for a clinical trial if it's something people have been using since the dawn of time. But I'll shut up. Joe, why don't you take it away?
Right. So, Lindy, some of the things with regards to what's coming up next November, we will have an initiative on the ballot that will be the medical cannabis. Okay, that will be a pro-cannabis initiative that will be on the ballot. We will also have on the ballot the constitutional amendment HJR4. And what that does is that eliminates the ability of the citizens to put forward an initiative to petition for the legalization of psychoactive substances. So the things that we've already talked about with regards to natural medicines, living medicines in the state of Idaho, such as cannabis, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and ibogaine, would be severely curtailed, and the only ones who could make decisions regarding that would be our extremely resistant legislative body. Now, as some other people have pointed out, 70% of the state of Idaho nearly 80% actively support decriminalization. That's in violation of, so this last year they passed a bill adding a $300 mandatory minimum fine for cannabis in the state of Idaho. That's in direct violation of the will of the people. 80% supported decriminalization, not further criminalization. In addition to that, 70% actively support a medical cannabis program in the state. Okay, they continue to resist that. They continue to push back against that. And they continue to say that the people don't want it, which is a lie. Now, what they do not want is they do not want recreational in the state. Recreational is only supported by less than 40% of the people. And that's understandable for a number of reasons. We are a very conservative state. We have seen the damage done when recreational takes over medical programs in other states, which is one of the reasons why we're so supportive of the North Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho's initiative, is because it is a very controlled method of allowing access within the state. They have safety measures to prevent abuses. Now, there's other people that are saying, well, that's not enough. We demand full recreation. Well, you're less than 40% of the people that demand full recreational. You're not going to get your wish. If you're not supporting the medical cannabis program, you're not supporting cannabis in the state of Idaho, is what that comes down to. Now, the HJR4, the Just Say No to HJR4, that's extremely important. Reason why is because it doesn't stop with just cannabis. That would ban all living medicines in the state of Idaho that haven't already been legalized. We would have to wait for the legislators to be lobbied. Okay. Read that how you will. I read it as corruption. I read it as deceit. I read it as lies. I read that as we know better than the people, which they definitely do not. Because my personal perspective is freedom is liberty is the freedom to choose the right thing. And right now, our legislative bodies continue to choose rules and laws that criminalize the right thing for so many of us to do. Whether that's cannabis, whether that's psilocybin, those living medicines that have been proven to have such efficacy, with rehabilitation, healing, and all the way around, would be denied, waiting for legislators that are recent arrivals, are old school, and I'm talking older than me, weren't older than some of the boomers that I grew up with. We still have silent generation sitting in our legislature writing rules from 50 years ago. They've gone in and they've said, these are things that are not for our state. Bro, you stopped being in touch with the people in this state 30 years ago. Please step away from the controls. Give it to some people who are more familiar with the process, more familiar with the needs of the people today. Now, so that's one of the reasons why it's so important for HJR4 to get the no vote. It's one of the reasons why it's so important to have this initiative on the ballot competing directly with HJR4 so that we show our legislators that the will of the people is yes on cannabis, no on their attempt to steal our rights to petition here in the state of Idaho. And it will also grant an opportunity for several of our legislators to actually be challenged, on their views, on their votes, over these last 2 to 6 years regarding the difficulty in making cannabis and several other living medicines illegal or legalized for care in the state of Idaho. So thank you for everybody, who supports Idaho's Vote No on HJR4 campaign. Legalize Idaho continues to take the point on that right now. There are several other organizations that are waiting until we get a little bit closer because we are a year out from that vote. Okay. Steady dropping little notes here and there, letting people know that it's happening. Drop the little earbuds, make sure everybody's aware of it to a certain degree. But when it comes down to it, the big push needs to be in the last 4 to 6 months so that it's fresh in people's minds why they have to vote no on HJR4 and why it is a violation of our rights that they are asking us to concede as a constitutional amendment. Yeah, it is. It is. And thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And here's a question for everyone. So please just feel free. Maybe we'll start with Elizabeth. And if you don't have a response to this, because maybe you don't see Idaho through these lenses, but why is Idaho so resistant? Is it old values? We have a lot of California transplants. They may turn the tide of something, the vote, especially in the Coeur d'Alene area. So.
It's a great question. I would love to know the answer to that, and I'm hoping that through this endeavor that I will find out. I happened to be in the room by some strange coincidence when HJR for the print reading was being read. I'd never been to the Capitol building before, and somebody asked me to just be there at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I was about to leave at 8:15, and then they were reading it. And so I had that opportunity, and Joe was, I always say, the lone person that was up there speaking. For a different perspective. Thank you, Joe, for that. But there were, I think, 9 people that that's actually why I founded Glow. But I think there were 9 people that were speaking in favor of HJR4. And this is just my perspective. I'm not an expert by any means, but listening, I sensed that there was a lot of fear. And perhaps there was some misunderstanding about maybe just some education that needed to happen, about the studies that are coming out of, no one was talking about that. And unfortunately, very sadly at that time, none of us, meaning the community, right, that this plant therapy community knew about this, that this was happening. So apart from Joe, who did know, there was no one to speak and to provide that counterbalance and to say, Johns Hopkins, Roland Griffiths, PTSD, there was no one to speak. And so again, to circle back to your specific question, I personally think that it's just that they don't know. And I believe, and I hope to believe that if there was better education provided, which is what we're trying to do now here, that people would be open to it. And so far, that's what I am discovering. I think that Idaho is ready for this, for psilocybin, and for, being open to a kind of a scientific, evidence-based approach.
Wonderful, thank you. Do any of the other panelists have thoughts on this question?
Yes, I do. One of the big things is there's a mixed coalition that are anti-cannabis here in the state of Idaho. We have several newcomers from California that are sitting in our legislature. Easily a third of them are recent arrivals to the state, literally came to Idaho to become legislators to save Idaho from itself. And some of their first things are, one, we're not going to let you bring cannabis here because it stunk up our state. Most of them, the only complaint they got about cannabis is I don't like the smell and I don't want the smell in my neighborhood. I don't want the smell when I'm walking on the green belt, downtown Boise. I don't want the smell when I'm walking downtown. And it's like, and you're willing to point a gun at somebody's head, in order to ensure that you don't have to smell something. In addition to that, we still have the rabid, devil's lettuce anti-marijuana campaign mentality that's particular in our boomers that are still in the state legislature. We continue to see that every time cannabis comes up. Somebody talks about the Greater Idaho Initiative and they're going, oh, yeah, reefer madness. They talk about the Greater Idaho Initiative, and you can literally watch them get ecstatic about the possibility that Ontario would no longer be able to sell cannabis simply because it would be part of the Greater Idaho and it'd fall under Idaho's laws, Idaho's prohibition, and they'd no longer be able to sell it in their county. And it's weird watching them get so enthusiastic about stealing the rights of the people. As Elizabeth can attest to. But a lot of that is a combination. It's the reefer madness. It's the individuals, our legislators who have fled other states, who ironically actually brought their method of legislation, from California to the state of Idaho. in an effort to save us from ourselves. They're doing everything they did in California that was wrong. But it's not a single idea that's causing the problem, that's causing the resistance right now. It's actually a coalition of ideas that just happen to find synergy in working together against the people and their best interests.
And how about the money piece real quickly? There was a question regarding how much money Idaho may not be aware that they're losing just from cannabis alone, not to mention other revenue streams from any future
Right.
medicinal
So
medication.
there's roughly 2 million people living in the state of Idaho, a million of those living here in the Southwest, and their primary shopping area does happen to be Ontario, Oregon. Now, Malheur County is responsible for 10% of Oregon's legal sales every year. For a county with approximately 10,000 people in it, especially 10,000 people who don't shop there because they grow there, that means the $2.25 million that is spent in Ontario a week is almost exclusively coming from Southwest Idaho, Boise area, Canyon County.
So there's
Now,
an economic argument, if nothing else, to
oh
say
yeah,
why not bring this revenue back to the state of Idaho?
absolutely. Once we take into consideration all of the border towns that are bringing in money, we estimate that there's approximately $4 million being spent in border town dispensaries every week. That's 200 million. When we take a look at what that does with the velocity of money in the state of Idaho, every dollar spent on a subject represents $1.80 in value. Not true, that's using what SNAP benefits represent, but that same money spent on cannabis here in the state, as opposed to being spent in Oregon, using it to fund the tax shortfalls from other initiatives like our grocery tax repeal. The taxes we generate from that would be able to remove the grocery tax. It'd be
Yeah,
able to supplement education.
maybe you should run for public office in Idaho, because then it seems like that might solve a lot of the problems.
Ironically, I'm actually filed with the FEC to run for U.S. Senate against Jim Risch.
Oh, wow.
So,
Congratulations.
yeah, it's not something I pushed just yet, but it is definitely something that's on the agenda. Yeah.
No, you sound like a great politician, someone that I would believe in. Okay, so there are a couple more questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Who hasn't? There's a couple of people. Courtney, do you want to speak? And then the other person who's raised their hand.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that. Why we think that they're so against it or whatever. I know one of the things that has been said a lot is it's all about the money. But the thing is that I don't think it is about the money. I think it really is just a power game because we as citizens spend about 7 to 8 times more prosecuting marijuana crimes than they actually make through the prosecution and locking people up for it and whatever. That's one factor that I realized in my research and it surprised me that they're not making more money off of prosecuting and keeping it illegal than they would if it was legalized in any way, shape, or form. They're, like you said, there's a lot of money being spent supporting other states and not Idaho. So the idea that it's all about the money, like they're making this big amount of money and that's their reason for keeping it illegal, that's not even a true fact anymore. I mean, that we're spending more money than they're making, and so we're basically paying to lock up our own people, which should
Well, and
anger a lot of people.
that's precisely the point, Courtney, when it comes to Idaho's prosecution. Reason why is because Idaho is one of the few slave states that allows the transport of prisoner-made products across state lines, one of four. That means that we can lease out money to meat packers like Tyson, or lease out labor to meat packers like Tyson and several other organizations on the cheap. The state taxpayer pays to house the prisoners while the prisoners are leased out as cheap labor to these meatpacking plants. So this is a huge moneymaker for IACI. they make more money off of the prison labor than they actually do off of illegal immigrant labor here in the state of Idaho. Yeah, Leo, that's the truth about the state of Idaho. In addition to that, one of our biggest problems here in the state of Idaho is female prisoner population. Outside of Montana, we have one of the highest densities of female prisoners, 70% of which are in for transportation of drugs. Usually they end up taking the fall for their boyfriend, who's not only using them to traffic drugs, but also human trafficking. They're trafficking them for sex. They end up in prison more often than not, where Cottonwood's jail or Cottonwood prison here in the state of Idaho for female felons also has one of the highest sexual abuse rates in the state. Well, in the nation, really. So it is about control. It's about making sure that there is access for people to things that they shouldn't have access to here in the state. And they feel that that's more important for the money, especially when they can tax the people of Idaho in order to make up the losses. In addition to that, prisoners in county jails as well as in state prisons are also all federally subsidized. So again, it's not just our money that's going to it, it's money from every other state. So this is one of those reasons why every state should be interested in seeing it legalized in the state of Idaho, because they're paying for our prohibition right now.
Wow, that is really fascinating, especially from like a human rights, like women's rights, as far as like a state that concerns itself with like conservative values as far as like protecting innocent women. That just seems like a really strong argument. It looks like Tanner has raised his hand. Maybe we'll have Tanner ask his question, get it answered, and then we'll have like a last statement from everyone about what maybe what you're excited about. We could end with like, what are you feeling excited about? What's giving you hope about, the movement? Where's your heart at? Tanner, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I was reading over this HCR 4 bill, and I might be wrong in saying this, but it looks like if it passes, it negates every other initiative relating to any kind of drugs that are in place at the time of it passing. Like, I might be wrong in reading it that way, but it sounds like that's how it's written. So I just wanted to see what you guys had to think about that.
You're saying it legally has the capacity to knock out the validity of anything that came before it.
Or
Tanner, yes, it does exactly that. And it's one of the reasons why they went with the constitutional amendment. Constitutional amendment will supersede any initiative that's on the ballot right alongside of it, which means a yes would still negate and nullify the cannabis initiative, the medical cannabis initiative, even if it passes on the same ballot, which is one of the reasons why it's important for a yes/no vote, because a yes is still a yes/no.
right. I had another question too. Do we have a plan in place for if this does pass, like what to do in the pivot of that? Like, is there something in mind?
Well, it
We
wouldn't
do not
affect.
have a fallback position in the event that the constitutional amendment passes, because the only option for legalization of cannabis or any other drug like or natural medicine like psilocybin is to lobby. Now, Elizabeth has already stepped in and done several good measures along that front, building a lobbying organization for natural medicines. Mary Jane Oatman continues to do that from her perspective as well. But these are lobbying organizations that will need to be funded in order to lobby our legislatures. This isn't, the initiative process will be done and gone for this purpose. You will never see another cannabis or psilocybin or ayahuasca petition in the state of Idaho if this passes.
And your founding fathers and mothers wanted us to have the capacity to make laws, happen from the voters' perspective, not from
Right.
those who are
Political power resides in the people in the state of Idaho.
right.
It's got a
And a
stake there.
constitutional amendment to the contrary is what several people have said. It's contrary to the intent of the Constitution. It's contrary to the Constitution of the state of Idaho. It's contrary to the Constitution of the United States. Yet this would be asking the people to give up our rights.
Right.
So regardless of how it violates the intent of the original Constitution, it would make it constitutional that we can no longer do those petitions.
So is that like a lawsuit thing, a follow-up, like a possibility if it does pass? Is that even gonna do it at
It's
any?
a constitutional amendment.
That's the only way to
Okay,
like.
you can go ahead and attempt it. You can pursue it.
Right.
I don't know that it's a viable option because I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I do know that it will be extremely difficult and extremely expensive if it is pursued, and the chance of success is not guaranteed.
Yeah, so why don't we, Tanner, maybe what we need to do in the future is some kind of public discussion regarding this matter more specifically. I think it's something that people need to be made more aware of. What I hear Joe saying is focus on that in the 4 months leading up because people have like short memories. And so they're gonna that if it's like a hot issue, give them 4 months before they have to vote on it because they need to be prepped like in that 4 month time span. That's what I heard him saying. So let's have all of our panelists. Mary Jane Oatman, do you want to start us off with just kind of something you're excited about, something that fills your heart with joy? Where you shared some of that if you're able, but to just kind of close out today, something to leave folks with as far as what you're excited about?
Yes, I'm really excited about the blueprint that we worked to develop. We have a lot of very progressive tribal leaders in the state of Wisconsin that called the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association to action to create a campaign that was really backed by the tribes, but was a statewide initiative. And so we actually have a youth ambassador, Nora Lowe, that has testified in the legislature. She's testified on the Capitol steps. We put a lot of thoughtful media behind this work. There's been 2 rounds of interviews with every member of the state legislature in Wisconsin replying to our surveys. So we have some blueprints in hand for a very successful campaign to get this data. And I think it goes back to what Joe said earlier is, we got to really pick and choose our battles and realize where we can have a victory, and it is with medical. It's not going to be with adult use or recreational cannabis, and quite frankly, we don't want that. I mean, I kind of when I heard that comment earlier about the new Idaho politicians coming in with the baggage of what happened in those other states, and to some extent, the more I see what is happening to the integrity of plant medicine with the rollout of a new state legalizing adult use, I just want to barf. So I want to keep it medical as much as possible, and just keep educating our tribal communities as much as possible, bringing this conversation up at all endpoints that I can. I mean, I spend a great deal of time because I do some shuttle work for elders that are homebound, and so I run to Washington State to go to the dispensaries quite a bit, and I bring that education with me. I'll just strike up conversation like, "Hey, do you know about HTR4?" And a lot of folks don't know about it. So I think that a good timely cadence leading up, and raising some money and getting some support to help make that happen as well. I've got some great ideas around that. I put that in the chat about sunburn cannabis. I was at the ICIA summit talking to everybody across the country, calling them to action, that they can't, rest on their laurels when we have veterans and elders still under attack in Idaho. Like, this is not a victory for you to have 8 off-reservation dispensaries when we still have federally incarcerated relatives in every single state that has legalized cannabis recreationally. We see a slight uptick of federal incarceration of American Indian, Alaska Native citizens. So data, and education. We're going to be doing that for quite a while, even after we pass and get some victories. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for putting that information in the chat. And Courtney, do you want to share?
Sure. I'm excited. Well, I don't really know. I'm excited about it just being involved in it, period. But I feel that the HCR4, with how many people we need to inform about HCR4 and clarify it, um, it doesn't, I don't think it will hurt much to at least like do what we're doing, just work on educating people of and raising the awareness, to take opportunities to face explain what it's about so that there is no confusion with the when it comes time to vote. Um, and then yes, definitely pick up the pace for sure during like right before it. But I think it's important that we have so many people to inform and to convince to vote who have not voted because they do not feel like their voice matters in Idaho. I was one of them until recently. So it's not only about informing people about HCR4, but it's also about encouraging people to go vote, if not for the candidates, then for the issues that are going to be on the ballot. So we all know how the candidacy goes around here in Idaho. If they have an opponent ever, which seems to be a pattern of nobody running against the people that we really don't want in office anymore. But so we need to raise awareness and encourage people to go vote and let them know that your voice does count this time. It matters. If if ever, it matters this election.
Thank you. That's very meaningful. I hear you loud and clear that you not only need to motivate people to understand what you're talking about as far as what this could mean for the state of Idaho, but that they also need to care again about voting, that somehow their voice does matter. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth, do you mind sharing what you're excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm excited, honestly, that we're having these conversations, right? That we're opening up to these conversations. And quite frankly, that I feel the reception has been so warm and welcoming. And I have a lot of optimism for the future here in Idaho in these regards.
Can I add something to what I said?
Sure. Thank you so
I
much,
for,
Elizabeth. Go ahead, Courtney.
I forgot to say this, that I'm also excited about the amount of support that we are seeing online, of not a whole lot in person. We're getting signatures on petitions because it's a lot easier and people are a lot more willing to put their signature down than they are to share their support publicly because they're afraid that somehow it will affect their lives to show their support. But the support is out there and we see it on our Facebook page with every post. Really, I mean, that's what surprised me most when I joined this group and started doing this campaign with them was so much. There are so many more positive comments than negative. Definitely different than what you would have seen even 5 years ago, I believe. That and that's encouraging to me every time I see somebody that shows their support in any way. It makes me excited to see how many people are actually really are actually for it. So now we just got to talk them out of their shell and show them not to be afraid to show that support because we need it now more than ever.
Thank you for that. So I hear you loud and clear. And now our very last panelist, Joe, if you have a chance to kind of close us out with what you're excited about.
One of the things I'm happy about is that we finally reached a point here in the state of Idaho where Idaho businessmen see a window of opportunity for legalization and access, that they're willing to put money, significant amounts of money, behind guaranteeing access for veterans, sexual trauma survivors, our elderly, and basically anybody, our cancer survivors. You know, that we finally reached a point where businessmen see this and want to guarantee this access for Idahoans. As patients, as a patient advocate myself, this is huge, and the amount of money, the amount of interest they put into ensuring that this is going to happen, it just lifts my heart like nothing else right now. You know, and what comes from that, what we see in the years that follow, you know, access to other natural medicines, access to other living medicines as a result to removing the stigma in the state of Idaho and doing it right in a way that we've seen so many other states do it wrong, you know, is just that step forward for me. Thank you for your time, Leo. I appreciate everything you've done. And again, our other panelist, Elizabeth, thank you for Glow and setting up what you're doing with the lobbyist. Courtney, what you're doing with Legalize Idaho and your friends there. And Mary Jane Oman, of course, you've always been busy, an icon, an activist, and someone who just sets the goals so high. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, everybody, for your hard work. And Leo, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have done it without everyone that I've connected with in Idaho. Thank you so much. I do want to share, we have one comment in the chat from Andrea saying, I healed myself all naturally of cancer, no chemo. I think she's referencing cannabis there. But one thing to consider is that sometimes Idahoans don't realize that ketamine therapy, which is some people consider it a hallucinogen, is available currently legally in Idaho. So sometimes we think these things sound scary and people being discombobulated, like with alcohol, or you take an opiate that the doctor prescribes you, you might be out of it. But there's already things out there that are legal in Idaho that people may not be aware of. Salvia is another one that is kind of almost like a hallucinogen that people can buy in Idaho. So sometimes we don't realize that these things are already out there, or like Joe mentioned, people are going across the border and getting cannabis that revenue could be in Idaho. So sounds like this is a great discussion. Sounds like we should do this again, maybe in a couple months, and maybe get some more people and more groups if you know of anyone. But okay, sounds like people are excited. I'm just looking in the chat. Thank you so much, and we'll end here today. Have a good night.
Thanks so much, Leo. You're awesome.